All right, we are live. And on today's episode, I interview an internationally renowned yoga teacher, a filmmaker, a father, a husband, a motorcyclist, and a world traveler. Welcome to the Winner Circle, Andrew Misle.
Thanks for having me. Good to reconnect. It's been about a decade.
It's been a
Yeah,
while. You
been a
didn't
while.
have as much gray hair, you're
No,
saying.
no, I've been working it in. The wisdom is coming through.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so much has changed for us both, I'm sure, and I'm excited to delve into that.
hmm
Um, the goal with these conversations is to really uplift, inspire, and empower everyone listening and everyone tuning in just to move forward with greater faith and belief in themselves on their hero's journey.
hmm
And all conversations tend to be very like positive, not focused on the negative in the world. And there's always something negative to be grasped too if you want, but that's not what we're doing here. And the first question sets us up on a positive note, and that's Andrew, what do you love about your personal world right now?
Oh my
What do you
God.
love about your life?
You know, I'm turning 47 this summer, and I've had many lives, like definite different lives. I've been a musician, I've been in film, I've been in yoga, I've been in trouble, I grew up in a different country. So many, many iterations of myself, but this is my favorite one. As a father of two, as a husband and a father, my life is just, I never thought it could be this good. So I would have to say the children and the ability to maintain this life that I've cultivated with my partner and then bring the kids into it as opposed to kind of like stopping everything because we have kids. They're part of everything that we do, traveling, yoga. Now my kids doing jujitsu. So it's just the ability to share everything that I've been cultivating for the past decade with them and see them just excited about it.
That's incredible. Yeah, your daughter
Yeah,
you were mentioning to me earlier, she's 5 and addicted to jujitsu.
she's loving
Uh,
it. Yeah.
and your son, he's one, or
He's
not
one.
even one, and
He
he'll be
he's 15 months. Yeah,
yeah, he'll be on the mats as soon as he's able to get on there. So that's exciting.
absolutely. Yeah.
I've been practicing jujitsu for probably 17 years now, and it's one of the best
Wow.
things they've ever done. And so to getting them started so early, what a gift.
Okay, well, I got a question for you. I know this is your interviewing me, but I got a question
Yeah,
for you.
yeah.
I'm 46, turning 47. How far could I get if I started now?
The
Could I get
best
my
time,
black belt?
yeah, the best time to start would have been 10 years ago. The next best time is now.
Now,
So yeah,
right,
go
exactly.
for it. Go
Yeah.
for it. Yeah, absolutely. And just make sure to pick a school that aligns with your values. And you don't want to be going too hard. Like you want to pick your partner. You don't want to be getting injuries because
Yeah.
injuries are very are a huge risk. But if you train with like-minded partners and a good coach, yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
start. Get
I think we found like the school that my daughter, this is the second school that we found for her. And this one's great. The studio, the environment, the values, everything is on point. It's playful, but they're not just playing games, they're actually doing drills. So I think I'm going to be
yeah.
starting here in the fall. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and your hip mobility from yoga will do you favors, and just all your body movement you learn through yoga will be a huge benefit, and also your knowledge of the nervous system. So
hmm
keeping the nervous system regulated while you're in these fight or flight situations, but just reminding yourself with your breath, like I'm just playing around here.
Well, I studied Kung Fu for like 15 years. That was my first
Hmm.
sort of introduction to meditation. And my Kung Fu teacher used to always tell me softer, softer. And it wasn't until I started doing yoga that I understood so much of what he was trying to teach me in terms of the strength and grace and the strength and softening and the ability to just kind of, yeah, be like water, as Bruce Lee would say, right?
Yep, yep, and that's exactly what jujitsu is, just flowing with the other person's movement, using their energy against them, the yin and the yang, and it's an old man sport. And Andrew, you're not
Mhm.
even an old man yet.
I don't feel old some
No,
days, but not
yeah,
generally.
no, you get there's definitely a path to our black belt. So yeah, I'm excited for you to embark upon that journey. I'm a 110% go for it.
Okay, I'm in.
Yeah,
We'll do this
so
interview in 10 years again, and
we'll we'll
we'll see
share
where I'm
some
at. Yeah,
math secrets learned along the
absolutely.
way. So yeah, like we mentioned in your bio, you've played so many roles, and you have so many roles in your life right now. But through all these roles, these hats that you wear, what would you see would be your mission, your personal mission that guides you through um, all these things that you do?
Authenticity, I think, is a big one. I think I spent a lot of my life trying to be somebody
Mm,
and trying to, try to escape aspects of myself or really not embrace them because I had, somewhat of a rough childhood, parents separated, moved countries. And I think moving countries and coming to a country midway through junior high puts you at a place where you feel like you don't belong. And so there's always this aspect of trying to fit in. And I think that carried through for a very, very long time. I would say into my 30s, almost 40s, always
mm-hmm,
trying to like strive, 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 strive. And there's nothing wrong with striving, but not really ever being able to be content with where I was up until really quite recently, I would say. So I think authenticity, the ability to show up exactly as I am, is an
mm-hmm,
important one. Um, and then through that, maintaining the ability to find the value and the freedom that comes from being disciplined and committed. You know, you talk about faith. I think there's an aspect of faith to discipline and commitment. The ability to step into the unknown while at the same time knowing. I don't know if that
mm-hmm,
makes sense,
mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like that has a lot to do with faith.
Hmm. Yeah,
Um,
faith is an important one. I feel at times in my life I wandered really, really quite sideways, and it could have gone really, really bad for me. I think I could have gone into like some deeper ends, but
mm-hmm,
there was always an underlying faith to me. Even in the darkest times of my life, and I don't know where that came from. If you believe in God, I think that's probably where it came from. I always felt a pull beyond my shitty can I swear on this?
yeah,
Shitty
yeah.
circumstances, like the circumstances where I felt like hopeless.
I'm excited to delve into. There's so much from your response you just said that I want to delve into, but I want to talk about faith right now. I feel that's like the last, like a big piece of my yoga puzzle that I've added in the past year and a bit. Um, Humble surrender, Ishvara Pranadana. Um, for me, I've chose God, Jesus, the Holy Spirit as that Ishvara, the God that I humbly bow to and recognizes above me. What does faith mean to you? What does God mean to you? And how did that come into your journey?
Well, I mean, I grew up Catholic, I grew up Christian, and then I rebelled from it for many, many years.
Hmm.
And I wouldn't even know exactly what to categorize myself at this point, to be honest. But I do have a connection to Christ. Um, yeah, I went to I've done a lot of pilgrimages too. I've gone through India and I've done some pretty crazy pilgrimages that are intense within different traditions. Um, and I did at every time take something from it. I would say that in every time I became a little bit more deconstructed. That which was holding so tight was coming apart. And it wasn't until very recently when I went to Italy, I was doing a climb and I was having all of this faith question. It's interesting that you asked. My mother had just passed and she was a very devout Christian. And I'd been feeling this call to figure out a way to come back, but I still had a lot of reservations to it because I had found so much beauty in other religions and other I wouldn't even say religions and other practices, and I always had this kind of rejection to the fact that if you're not a Christian or baptized, there's no road for you, and I still have sort of a mixed relationship with that because well, we could get into that, but at the end of the day, I think that what started to call back to me. So I was climbing this mountain, and it was a really beautiful day, and it had been like 3 hours, and at the top of this mountain, I was having all these thoughts about my mom and Christianity, and I see this cross, this man-made cross at the peak of this mountain. Just as I was thinking about, but also because I was in this city called Assisi, which is the city of St. Francis of Assisi, and
Yeah.
it's a very spiritually charged type of pilgrimage place. Like when you go there, you feel like you're on a spiritual retreat. So there was a lot of that going in the back of my mind. And then I saw this cross, and I just kind of had this moment where I was felt like I was called to pray. And so I sat down and I prayed, and I had this, I don't know what it is. I was filled with spirit, if for lack of a better word. But I would also say that anytime I climb a mountain, I'm filled with spirit. I here's that's another thing. I've been to the Golden Temple. I've been to many, many temples around the world, but I never feel the hand of God quite the same as I do when I climb a mountain. For
Mm-hmm.
me, that's probably one of the most spiritual practices that I do is just climbing a mountain. And so to have climbed a mountain and to have seen this cross was a really potent sign to me, and it's been lingering in my mind, like what that means to me. Lately, I picked up a book that I've been wanting to read for a really long time. I still haven't read it. It literally just came in. It was a book on where is it? It was a book written by Yogananda
Yeah.
about yoga and the Christ. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be reading that right away. So I guess it's interesting that you asked that question because obviously it's not clear to me where I'm at with it right now, but I am feeling quite the pull. I'll say one more thing though.
Yeah.
When I was in Italy, my wife, we went for like 2 months and we traveled. We went to like 15 different cities and some small villages, maybe 100 people, and then bigger villages and big cities. Every single one has at least one or two cathedrals, and so the church is very, very present. And whatever you might think about that, what I did notice is the values that it instilled in people and the sense of community and the sense of family that I felt there. It was so beautiful to be in Italy with my family and feel the warmth of people. And I have to say that has something to do with how much faith is still in that country. So lots of questions even for myself right now, but that's where I'm at.
Yeah. You mentioned you had some mixed reservations. What would those be?
Well, then I'm not so keen that if you're not baptized and if you're not Christian, that you're not on a path.
Yeah, I
I
don't
feel
agree with
that,
that.
and I don't agree with that. I think that that's a very egotistical way of looking at God.
Yeah.
I mean, even the word. How can you encapsulate something infinite with the word? There's no word
Mm-hmm.
to it. There's just, you know, I feel my connection to Jesus, even when I stepped away from the church, got way stronger when I started meditating, when I started
Mm-hmm.
practicing yoga, and I started to feel a divinity through my practice. And I feel that every time I practice. And really, the science of yoga is turning up the voltage of life within you. And
Mm-hmm.
what is God if God is not that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
Absolutely.
so I believe Jesus as a teacher. I believe him as a maybe yeah Messiah, right? Um, but I don't think it negates many of the other teachers that have come and gone.
No, I agree. I agree, and I like to follow other teachers as well, but I place Jesus, God, the Holy Spirit at the top, and maybe that top will change, but just that humble surrender. And through me, like my return came through a tragedy as well. Like my former partner and former co-host of this podcast, she passed away, and then that
Sorry to
got
hear that.
me. Yeah, thank you. It got me just re-examining things. And like what I learned when you give it up to God is everything that is happening for you, and everything that you wish would have happened, well, that's not for you. So just be blessed and be grateful for what you have, and just trust that there's a higher power guiding you. And I kind of believed in that philosophy before, but until I said, okay, this is the this is who I give it up to, rather than just kind of the universe, it didn't feel as real.
You know, I don't think Jesus cares. I don't think Shiva cares. I don't think any of these
No.
deities care about your devotion. I
Yeah.
really think that the whole point of it is what it does for you inside of
Yeah.
yourself, right? So
Yeah.
whoever that is and whatever that is, and for me, it is Jesus as well in many ways. And like I said, I guess I would have to say it to you the same as you. Like if there was like a number one, like a peak to all the teachers, it would probably be Jesus as well because it's what I grew up in and I've studied him quite a bit. Even though I wandered around, it still keeps drawing me back. But at the end of the day, it's about the sweetness and about the divinity that it brings out in you to have devotion. That's the most important thing. And I think that that's where a lot of religions sometimes get a little frictions with one another is because they forget that piece.
Yeah. No, I agree, and I agree when you say it's about the feeling. It's like what does that feeling of and that intention create within your system, and that feeling ripples onward. Another thing about my return to the church that I think like you'd maybe understand is like the music. So the
Mm.
worship. So singing these songs. And I grew up like not really afraid to sing because I remember when I was younger, in a music class, like the teacher said, "Oh, like you're not a good singer," and then like I immediately started like lip syncing in choir, and then just like not singing because I didn't want to be like bad at it. But when I first got to church, they were singing these like beautiful songs, and I was like, "Whoa, these people are like really into this." But then I was reading the words. I really believe in the power of words and everything they're singing. Okay, I don't think there's anything wrong with what they're singing. It's actually positive stuff. So then like I tried singing and I just felt so free. And then so now when I sing in worship at the start of service, it's just a celebration. It's a surrender and it's joining with the community and it produces like a great feeling. And
I mean,
you're a
that's an
music,
old yogic practice in of itself, is not yoga and the resonance that it creates within yourself. You're combining body, breath, and spirit to create this resonance. It's very
yeah,
powerful. This is why I think we do it in church and singing, is because it really embodies spiritual, like the divine within you when you're creating that resonance and combining with feeling, and then doing it in community inside of well, at least back in the day, still sacred geometric shapes that create
yeah,
resonance, right?
yeah. So
Um,
very interesting. And I bring this up because well, still are a musician, but you used to focus a lot on music. You were
yeah,
touring before you found yoga. So let's kind
that's
of
right.
let's start like we're going to examine your origin story and maybe we start with music or what brought you to music and then how that led to yoga and yeah, but yeah, wherever you want to go back. Let's examine your
Sure.
origin story, your journey here.
Well, I grew up in Chile, and my
Yeah.
father was a massive icon in Chile. He was a singer. He was like he'd been famous his whole life. And so I grew up on the stage. I grew up beside the stage watching him perform. So I think it was always a part of my life. It wasn't something that I learned, right? I think it was a language for me. Singing wasn't. It was like learning how to speak. Nobody teaches you how to speak. You're speaking because it's all around you and it's what you know. And I think singing was that for me. I never took any singing lessons. It was just something that was always a part of my life. But at the same time, I got to witness kind of what it did for my father, because that was really his first love. He couldn't really hold a family. He'd been born an orphan. He grew up to be a famous guy at a very early age. So imagine what that does to a human being, to be idolized from an early age. So no, I don't blame him for that. It's just how he was. Parents separated, and what that did to me was I kind of rejected it for a really long time. I didn't want to have anything to do with singing. I didn't want to do performing. And then in university, somebody approached me because they had heard that I was a singer at a choir years ago, and they asked me if I wanted to be in a band. And then suddenly there I am, singing. And fast forward, I'm touring and recording albums and doing all that sort of stuff. But that whole journey for me was a very painful one, because I had my own demons, and I wasn't taking care of myself. I was drinking a lot. I had eating disorders. It was a very rough time. And at, when we'd already been deep into it, we'd recorded a few albums. We'd just recorded our third album. I had just landed a part in a TV series, and I was starring on this TV show. It was on network television. So everything that I was working for was just like thriving and starting to happen for me, but I was in just this despair, like in a really, really dark place. And then I just kind of quit everything. I did the most dramatic thing, quit everything, started doing yoga, went to India. And then that's kind of, if you want to get into it, that's kind of how I got back into yoga, was through just despair. You know,
Yeah.
I had
Yes.
practiced martial arts growing up. I'd done kung fu for years, and there's a sense of solace that it always brought to me after practicing. And actually, the reason why I was stepped back into yoga was to get into shape so I could go back into doing martial arts. But the minute I started practicing, it was like I felt like I was remembering something. And then even like a lot of the kung fu that I'd been practicing kind of made more sense. And turns out that I think all I was trying to do through kung fu was what I was getting through yoga. So that's how I
Hmm.
began doing yoga.
And for someone that doesn't practice yoga, what were you getting from that initial practice when you first began?
Peace.
What were you? Peace.
Mm. I was getting a minute. I was getting space in my head. There was insanity, and then there was stillness. And in that stillness, I felt peace, and I felt like I could just let go. You hear about letting go, but what does that actually mean? I mean, like literally, my whole body could just relax. My mind could relax, and then it would come back. So
Yeah.
then you go back and you do it again. Then you comes back and you do it again, and that's how you start to build the space. And then when you start to build enough space, then the identity starts to come apart, and then suddenly it's the space that you become more identified with. And in that space is where it's that place where I feel God. That's a place where I feel I understand the message of Jesus, and it teaches me how to discern from religions and get into the actual feeling of the message, not the words of it. I think language is an interesting thing because language can describe many, many things, but it can never really, truly ever describe anything.
Mm-hmm,
It
mm-hmm,
can never
mm-hmm,
really get you to understand what a feeling is. Only a feeling can do that. So
mm-hmm,
yoga is a very practical way to feel spirituality because reading about it is not the same.
mm-hmm. That's what I love about the Tao.
Mm,
Like the Tao cannot be named. You can't write it.
no.
And words can only do so much to explain these concepts we're talking about.
But even yeah, yeah. And yoga's that. You know, I was teaching at a yoga festival actually when you texted me about this.
Yeah.
And I had just had a talk that morning, and I kind of opened the whole thing saying that nobody can teach you yoga. People can teach you techniques, and then maybe one day yoga will happen.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
if you really understand the concept of yoga, it's not something somebody can teach. And for me, it's like akin to God, becoming one with the universe, becoming one with the Creator, becoming it. Find and pulling God out of you is really what for me yoga can be looked as right. So
Mm-hmm.
the practice of yoga is a science for that. It's not a religion. It's not a belief system. It's a literal science to invoke the divinity within, to literally turn up the essence of who you are, which fundamentally is the universe. And so I always think about, if you think of God and you see it's everlasting and it's eternal and you can't parse it, then you are that.
Mm-hmm.
You can't fragment yourself out of that. So God is
Mm-hmm.
within you. And
Mm-hmm.
much of what this practice does is dissolving everything that isn't so that what is can reveal itself within you.
Mm-hmm. So from when you first began to now has been thousands and thousands and thousands of hours on the mat practicing and teaching. How has your practice evolved?
Um, I think it's much more intimate now than it has ever been because I've stepped back from teaching quite a bit. I taught I started teaching quite early in my practice because I felt like I said, I felt like there was a remembrance. I think also performing on stage kind of gave me an advantage to get in front of people and express what I was feeling through the practice.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it might have started too early. I think there's value in taking, you know, 5 to 7 years before you even start teaching. Personally, I think that.
Yeah.
Um, and I didn't have the opportunity to really, really not teach and practice up until COVID. So when COVID happened, well, a lot happened that year. I had just come back from India, 2019. It's been like what was that was like my seventh trip there, and on that last one, it was very, very potent. I felt like the person who went there never came back in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, we got pregnant while I was there, and when I came back, I kind of quit teaching at all the studios, and then COVID happened. So it's kind of hard to say what made all the change happen. But I think that that trip really reframed everything for me. I needed to step back from teaching and really get back to the why of my practice because it became so much about getting in front of people and teaching. And so what was that? I was starting to get lost with it. And I think a lot of it had to do because I gained a little bit of notoriety, and that can be a double-edged sword because suddenly it can become quite performative. Not, still honest, still like sharing something valuable, but there was this desire of being in front of more people and like more classes. And, I taught in front of like 1,500 people at a time before. And at that point, I'm like, what is this? It's beautiful. People are coming together, but it felt much more of a performance than actually teaching yoga, in some
Mm-hmm,
ways.
mm-hmm.
In some ways, it still is teaching yoga, of course, but I'm kind of lost in my question. Sorry, I'll bring it back. I think a lot of what has been the way it's shifted, at least for the past few years, has become much more simple. I'm trying to get back to the basics. You know, I had this whole journey. I think a lot of teachers have that journey of like starting, being hungry to teach, being hungry to practice, accumulate more and more and more knowledge, and then you get to a point where you're like, okay, it's actually about getting more simple. I think a lot of it. I haven't really talked much about this. Um, and I taught and I learned from a teacher who kind of had a bit of a fall from grace, and that's a hard thing to, yeah, that was hard because it was somebody that I looked up to and who literally saved my life
Mm-hmm.
and, and introduced me to a practice that I felt introduced me to my teacher, which is now me. Like I am my teacher now, and he introduced me to that. So he is, by definition, my guru, but he's
Mm-hmm.
also someone that I don't speak to anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a hard thing to, and maybe that's why I also stopped teaching for a long time a bit because I was dealing with like parsing through the confusion of like what is what, like. But I also think that it's a necessary evil when that happens, and it happens in a lot of traditions because the teacher needs to die for
Yeah.
you to actually truly come to as a practitioner or even as a teacher. There's an old saying, what do you do on the path of enlightenment if you see the Buddha on the path? You kill the Buddha. And the meaning of that is that you got to let go of everything. The
Mm-hmm.
method, you know, once you have the true north, you don't need a compass anymore. You just have to follow the knowing. You
Mm-hmm.
can take a cab all the way to heaven, but eventually you got to get out of the cab and go in. That means that
Mm-hmm.
at some point you have to let go of your teacher. You have to let go of your system and really teach from a place that feels authentic. And I think that's kind of where I'm at right now. My teaching is coming from a place that I feel is authentic. I'm not seeking students. I offer things and people come to them, and yeah, I don't know if I answer your question or not.
No, I think you did. I feel like that's the best place to teach from, is not needing anything from it other than to be of service and to allow your heart to shine in your example and in your leadership.
I think having children was part of it too. I think a lot changed when I had kids. A lot shifted. A lot of my values and my ability to put up with bullshit just diminished a hundredfold. So it's like I'm only going to do what I can do and what I want to do and for the right reasons. And I think that also affected my teaching. I really only want to do the things that I feel I want to do. I don't overdo it. I do a lot less, but the quality is much better and I'm much more present. It's not
Hmm.
rehearsed. It's coming from the heart. It's not coming from teaching 25 classes a week and having this like dialogue that I'm ready to present.
Yeah, and act. I was listening to a previous podcast you're on, like a few months ago, and you're talking about how you used to be a boy trying to be a yoga teacher, and now you're a yoga teacher, becoming a man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
Yeah. Going back to this idea, like with my father, I think I've thought about this a lot. I basically grew up without a father in my life, and there's a lot of lessons that a man has to pass on to another man. And if he doesn't, that man still has to acquire that knowledge.
uh,
And for me, that meant that I had to go out and seek it, and it took a long, long time for me to get that knowledge, really. And so
yeah,
it, I feel like I became a man very, very late in life because I was a boy seeking knowledge, seeking to feel secure and to feel, yeah, like there's definitely self-esteem issues that happen from not having a father around.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and then when the whole yoga thing, like that I was just speaking, that kind of fell apart. And then my father passed away, my mother passed away at the same time. There was just, and then my children were born. It all kind of happened at once where I'm like, okay, well, I'm the one now. It's just
Yeah.
me. And there was something really beautiful at that. It was actually very natural, I think, too. I think I worked really, really hard. I, I don't like saying I was looking for myself and finding myself, but that's truly what I was doing. And I was working really hard, and I was practicing yoga, and I did all these like pilgrimages and these practices, and then suddenly you have kids, and then something happens. So it's either all that worked and just like crystallized into something true at that moment, or that's just what kids do. I think
Mm-hmm.
as a as a somebody with a past of myself, and or anybody who had any problems with your parents or a rough childhood, when you have when you have children, there's two ways that can go. You can either carry on those karmas to your kids, or liberate them and take all of that and have it be wisdom that helps you be more informed as a parent. And I think for that to happen, for that to become wisdom, there needs to be a lot of reflection. And even though I wasn't doing it on purpose, all that yoga, all the meditation, that was reflection time, you know, and I wasn't noticing the advancements that I was having within myself, I think, until I became a parent, when all of that work kind of like initiated me in the right way. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, because the relationship that I have now with my kids is the relationship that I always wanted with my parents, or with my father. So yeah, it's been a real blessing.
So, what lessons are you wanting them to learn that you're wanting to teach them to instill in them so they don't have to take the long way to those lessons that you've learned? And of course, there's going to be obstacles that they need to overcome, and I think that's important. But what are the key lessons you want to instill in them?
Oh,
Um,
I mean, every day there's not one thing. It's a constant being there that is downloading who they're going to be. I okay, let me how do I say this? I mean, obviously there's lessons. I want to teach them about discipline. I want to teach them to be kind. All these things that everybody wants to do, but ultimately it's being there. It's just really, really being there, being who I am, being the best version of myself, being happy, treating my partner. I mean, I'm so in love with, like, I'm lucky because I also have a partner that is like my best friend, you know? So that is what I'm teaching them. It's being how I am now with my partner, with my work, which is also my art. So just that's what I'm teaching them. And and then you talk about faith. I have to have faith that my knowledge is coming out, and it's not one thing. It's just the everyday, the way that you are with them. That's the whole thing. I want to teach them to not look up to people too much. Maybe that's a big one. Don't look up to anybody. Don't look down on anybody. Be
mhm,
yourself. And I think that's a big one, and just cultivate that. Keep cultivating that. Keep cultivating that through discipline. Keep cultivating the importance of discipline. That's a big one. Like the freedom that you can get from discipline. That's a really big one. I mean, there's a lot that I'm going to teach them. I've thought about how transparent I'm going to have to be at an early age about many things because of just technology and what they're going to have access to at a very early age. So I'm going to
mhm,
have conversations that I probably didn't have to have until much later, about,
yeah,
sex, drugs, whatever. It's like, okay, this is your life. You can do whatever you want, but this is where the road leads. And just be honest.
mhm,
I think with my kids have been and my daughter have been very, very mindful of developing dialogue at a very early age. We have open line of communication so that when they're adults, that's there. I don't have to build that pathway of back and forth. I make it a point to have meaningless conversations. It's very important to have the meaningful conversation, but to have meaningless conversations too, so that there's a comfort there, so that whenever they want to speak, they know they can speak to me about anything. So
mhm,
I think it's less of a one thing or what is that I want to pass on, because I'm growing into a father as well. I don't have all the answers. I'm trusting that the work that I've done with my practice, with yoga, and the shit that I overcame in my life are going to be the tools that are going to let me. I have more tools to address different
Yeah.
situations, I think. And also
Hmm.
teaching yoga is allowed me to express myself in a very subtle way as well.
Yeah. Um, your partner, their mother, has played a huge role in your journey.
Oh yeah.
Let's track the origin of that and how it has evolved and how she complements to you in your life.
Yeah, Laura's just yeah, I think she I've never felt judged once by her, but she's never let me not give it all. Like she's never let me behave like a child either. She's the first one to call me out when I'm being a 3-year old. Not so much anymore, but as we grew in our relationship and I've just always had this incredible trust in her, in our relationship. And the love just keeps getting more intense. And I feel incredibly blessed because I almost feel like it's a rare thing these days. And especially when I look around how a lot of people are having, anyways, I don't want to get into that too much, but sorry, what was your question?
Just about your
Yeah,
partner, Laura, and
how we met? Is that what you asked?
well, I was gonna get there,
Yeah.
but yeah. So let's start. How are you guys met, and how has that relationship evolved, and how do you guys keep it growing and evolving to uh, uh, like beyond bounds that you would have thought before?
Yeah. Well, we met. She was at the time, she was a manager at Lululemon, and I was an ambassador for Lululemon. We were both dating other people at the time. We all broke up, and then I just started to like go visit Lululemon more often and talk to Laura Miller. And I asked her out on a date, and one thing led to another, as they say. But to be honest, I never thought I'd date her. I didn't think that I was her type. I wasn't her type. I actually know that I wasn't her type. And she didn't think that she was going to date me. And there was something really special about that because neither one of us was putting on these pretenses. We were just being who we were.
Yeah.
And it turned out that we had a lot of fun being around each other. So we just kept hanging out, and then suddenly here we are. It's like it just kept growing and growing, and it keeps growing. It evolves, and we've never. I mean, I think it's important to have fights. I always think it's important to have fights in relationships, but we've never had a fight. Like our relationship is really beautiful. We're still very passionate. We're still doing the things that we like doing. She never, we've never tried to change each other in any way. And I think in the most part, we've always been each other's champion, never been in competition with one another. I think those are the things that sometimes can get in the way in relationships. And I think that we probably both learned from past relationships how those things can go that way. And we found each other at the right time. Um,
Hmm.
I think we've been very conscious at the beginning about giving each other the space that we needed until we realized that we didn't want any more space. Uh, we wanted to spend more time together. We traveled. That was a big passion of ours, and I think that was something that we still do today, even with the kids. Like River's already been to Italy and Peru, and she's only 5, and that's something that always brings us closer together. The ability to like step out of our lives and on an adventure. We're both passionate about being in adventure, and I think that we'll always have that passion. So these things that we've always loved to do, we still do. Um, I'm always trying to be the better. I'm always looking to be the better version of myself. A lot of time is for me, but I think for mostly for my family. So it's a net benefit for both. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know what else to say. I think the one thing that I'll say is that she believed in me at a time when I was really having a hard time believing in myself, and that meant the world to me to like because I not that I didn't believe in myself, but I still had a lot of self-esteem issues, a lot of like worth issues, and to have somebody confirm a knowing that I had about myself made me step into that. Like I
Mm-hmm.
always had this knowing about myself, but I wasn't stepping into it. And it just took somebody to reflect that back at me to give me the confidence to keep stepping into it. And yeah, she's helped me grow a lot,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
So, who have been some other impactful mentors and helpers that you've met along your path that have really helped shape you into the man you are today? Who were these people, and what were the primary takeaways you've learned from them that you've incorporated into who you are?
Sure. Well, again, I guess the first one would be my mother. She was my hero. She brought me from Chile in her mid 40s when she was 40, when we were no money, worked a waitress job to put a roof over my head, like the whole classic thing, and just like always with uh, a real positivity about her. She was so positive to everybody. Like she made a mark on anybody that she met. She was loud. She was unedited. She was a person of her word. Like if she said something, that was it. So that was one of the things the things that I got from her is that, and I'm not perfect at it, not as good as she was, but if my word is my bond, and I try to be as integral as I can in the things that I do. I've not always been good at that, but I think I'm getting better at that now. Uh, it kind of went. I was there, very, very integral when I was at a certain my 20s, 30s, not so much, and now I feel like I'm back at it. So I think that I owe that to my mom, the hard work as well. And then my kung fu teacher, he was my first sort of male mentor. When I first came to Canada and I didn't speak English. It's actually the Karate Kid story, if you think about it. I came to Canada. I didn't speak English. I was getting into fights, and I met a kung fu teacher, and he was my first mentor. He really took me in, treated me like a son. I actually grew up very much in the Chinese community here for many many years, but just like a very traditional Chinese father, it was his way or the highway. He wanted me to be a doctor. He wanted me to be a businessman. You want to be an actor? What the hell is wrong with you? That kind of old school parenting. But what I got from him was self esteem. Yeah, he kind of started building that for me with Kung Fu. And he gave me the tools to know that I could be good at something, if I put my heart into it. And that was something that I really needed at that time. And yeah, he was the first male figure outside of my family that really kind of took me in. Yeah. So I would say Chu Lao. And the one thing that he used to always try to impart me is that winning is not a sometimes thing. You always win. You have to always win, even when you lose. And that's something that I carried with me because even with my yoga teacher, that whole Yoda thing about there is no trying, there's only doing.
Hmm.
It's in the same vein, and I pass that on to my kids. It's like trying is a very dangerous word because it's almost like giving you an excuse to really not give it your all. It's good to like
Hmm.
do it and fail. It's different than trying. So that was my kung fu teacher. Who else? And then of course my yoga teacher. He yeah, I learned so much from him. For one, the practice. He taught me how to again gave me more self esteem. Taught me to really discern who I wasn't, and to keep stepping into you know ultimately who I am now. And that process is one that I can't really get into too much because it was pretty esoteric at times. It was pretty
Hmm.
painful at times, but ultimately I I feel like I'm deeply indebted and grateful to the things that he showed me, and at the same time, the things that he didn't show me, but that I learned by observing to not repeat. That was another mentorship that he gave me as well. You know,
Hmm.
um, there's been so many teachers. I've Guru Singh, and then friends. I have really, really good friends. I think men need good friends, male friends, not to even necessarily sit down and have a heart to heart, but to just like bust each other's balls and go climbing with. I think that I don't know. a lot of men, like a lot of, I see a lot of stuff online about, oh, men need to get and gather and be in circles and have these talks. I'm like, I don't know if that's how men do it. I really think that, I think more like jujitsu is probably how men do it.
Yeah,
Men heal and communicate and are with each other different than women. It's
yeah,
just,
yeah.
we're not made the same to to relate in the same way. And I think that I've had that in my life. I've had friends that have really been that for me.
Well, I'm excited for the friendships you're gonna gain from your jujitsu journey as well, because I've made a lot of friends along that path, and it's beyond the talking. Like you're rolling together, you're moving together.
It's very
It's
intimate. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a very beautiful relationships through that. So let's get into the winning. Your Kung Fu teacher taught you to always win, I believe it was. And these conversations are called Welcome to the Winner Circle. To me, what winning is has evolved over time. But what winning means to me now, and when I started these conversations, is about the process. We live in a very destination-oriented society. Like when I get this job, car, money, relationship, et cetera, I'll be happy. And then we get there, then it's maybe there's a momentary happiness, and it's now what? So for me, winning is embracing the presence in the now, in the forever now, and giving it up to God, just giving it up to a higher power. So that's what winning means to me now. It's evolving. What does winning mean to you
It's
now?
very, very much in line with that. I think it's, I think winning for one is recognizing when you're winning. Because it's interesting. Like sometimes I have to like really step back and recognize how well I'm doing at times. You don't, you're always like you said, you're always like striving and striving and never actually taking a moment to really be grateful. So it's tied into gratitude. It's tied into really being appreciative of what you have. Uh, it's not anymore about making more, getting more. Those things are nice, and it's good to keep working to those things. But for me, having a family, being in a good relationship with my wife, being healthy, being happy, that's winning. That's wasn't always what winning was for me. And I think when he meant that winning is not a sometimes thing, it's an always thing. It's an attitude. It's an attitude of being in journey. So that when you're doing something and you fail, that's part of the doing. It's just that
Hmm.
was just step one. And then you can do
Hmm.
it again and you're going to fail again. If that was step two, step three, step four, maybe step five is the one where you actually have success. But you couldn't have been there without step one. So actually, the
Yeah,
whole process is winning, 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 winning. It's just consistency, consistency, and being in it, like you said.
I agree, and I also feel it's how you feel in the now, because how you feel in the now ripples into your future. So in the now, if you're like I could be better, or I want more, like rather than the contentment of what is, gratitude for what is, those are two different frequencies. So like, what is your now frequency? What are the foundations of your now? Yoga has taught me that.
Contemplating on death too. Contemplating on the fact that you are going to die. So what really matters? The contemplation
Hmm.
on death is a beautiful one. I've almost died a couple times. I've had surgeries in the past, and I've had to be really humbled. And that was a beautiful gift in many ways because it simplifies a lot of things. It takes out a lot of the bullshit, and so
Hmm.
it really takes you down a notch, so you can build with a foundation of like what's important in your life right now. And
Uh-huh.
that was a gift that I had in 2011. I was in surgery. I had to be in a hospital for like 6 months, and you forget those lessons at times, but it was a good time, and it still is a good time for me to go back to be really grateful as to where I'm at now because I could have died then, and then watching my parents die and that proximity to death and having kids and watching your parents die at around the same time was a trip because you start to think about your own mortality and all this stuff, and so kids, man, you love them so much, it's almost overwhelming. Like it's almost overwhelming how much you love them because of like the fear that you have now is completely irrational. Fears that you never had before about your own mortality, about making, like, so I think that if you can stay leveled and step into parenthood, for me, this is what it's best. Step into parenthood gracefully with a good partner, allowed for this winning to be felt, you know, because I was able to contemplate on all the things that I've accomplished in my life, that I have around me right now, that sometimes I took for granted. And
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's I guess it's in line with what you said about presence. I think kids have really taught me how to laugh more, how to be more present. Yeah, it's such a gift.
Mm-hmm. And so you almost died physically multiple
Hmm.
times, but you've surely died many times the ego, many ego deaths, who you thought you were no longer who you are. What have you learned about the ego on your journey?
Yeah, the ego needs to be your best friend, not your worst enemy. That's
Okay.
what I've learned. You know, the ego gets a bad rap. It depends on your relationship that you have to ego. The ego is very necessary. You couldn't
Uh-huh.
walk across the street without getting run over if you didn't have an ego.
Uh-huh.
So it's the relationship to the ego and how and what you feed the ego. You know, how exaggerated is the ego and what parts are exaggerated with the ego. So it's actually not letting go of the ego. It's about cleansing the ego and developing a healthy relationship with it. Be your best friend with it so that it can serve you. Because the ego is a very beautiful thing, but it's your identity to the ego that sometimes can get a little perverted in some ways. You know, it can get a little, maybe perverted is not the right word. I don't know what the word I'm looking for, but I think letting go and cleansing the ego, letting go the aspects of the ego that aren't authentic to who I am, that aren't serving my path, is I guess more of what I've done. And also embrace the ego so that it can strengthen you, so that it can build your practice. These are these. I think the ego is a very beautiful thing. I think it's gotten a bad rap. It's what you feed the ego, and so I had to kill off some of the demons that were latched onto my ego, you know, and a lot of it had to do with self-esteem, stories that I'd built. You know, that's the thing. I guess that's another thing that I learned that I'm really cautious about children is just like what a small seed could do. I mean, you talked about your teacher saying that you couldn't sing, and it's just like that's a wild thing to. That's almost like this. It's it's such a wild thing to say because it's music. You know, like there's no good music or bad music. Music is music. It's a taste thing for sure, but it's just like an expression of the soul. You know, and for
Mm-hmm.
somebody to say that put you on a path that really latched onto your ego, and you've had to clean it. You've had to fill it with God and fix it through that, you know. And I had to do that in many ways. I've done some crazy practices that have allowed me to, in some way, dissolve some of the stories that I've had.
Mm-hmm. Could you share some of those?
I could share them, but I don't know what they did.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, some of them I do because they've been very like things that somebody said that made me kind of realize things about myself. But you know, I've done pilgrimages like 2019. I did this. It's called the 84 Steps as part of the Sikh tradition, and it's these 84 steps that you take. It was I think it was in Gwindwal. It's in northern India, in Punjab, near Punjab. It's this practice where you, and this is where actually the Sikh tradition really kind of formed was in this place. And the pilgrimage that they do is they go down these 84 steps in this cave and they jump in the water. And then they go to the first step and they read the Japji. So the Japji is a very, very long prayer. It takes I mean, it takes me about 20 minutes reading it because it's in Gurmukh. It's a language people don't even speak anymore. And I don't know, I couldn't recite it. So I had to like learn how to phonetically read it and like learn how rhythmically read it by listening to songs because it has a very particular, it's like a mantra, right? So it took me like 6 months to just learn how to read it. And then we printed it off. We put it on these like we laminated because you have to dive into the water and then go back and do it. So, anyways, long story short, it took me 23 hours to do the whole thing, and I would say about 80% of it I was hallucinating, like full on hallucinations. Like and I was with a couple of friends, and I think like Kelby a couple of times had to like catch me from like toppling over and going down these like stairs. That whole experience was so intense. The leading up to it, the amount of times that I had to recite that mantra, and mantras are very powerful, and the fact that people have been doing that for hundreds of years, potent place. And so I'm not sure what happened to my camera. Anyway, so I'll go to this one. I have two cameras. I have my GoPro, not my GoPro, my. Anyways, so when I said I came back from India, not the same, I think that had a big part of why that was. It's like I don't know exactly what it did for me to do that particular practice, but my life has been better ever since. So that's just like one, and then I've done the ayahuasca thing, and I went to Peru back when it wasn't popular yet, and I did the whole. I was in the Amazon and did that thing. Then
Yeah.
yeah, it's just been many different experiences, kind of seeking.
Yeah. Ayahuasca has played a really big role in my journey. And one of my major influences is Ram Dass,
Mm,
and psychedelics played a role in his journey. But then he got to the point where um, everyone is just getting high, and then
yeah.
they come down, and then you're just wanting to get high again. And it's finding out ways to stay high without having to be high, and that's kind of where I'm focused on now because I could remember the feelings from ayahuasca or from psilocybin or from just different experiences, and it's how to channel those while just being you.
I went to I did the whole thing like to go into we went to the Amazon, spent 2 weeks doing ceremonies. And we were in the middle of the jungle in these huts that were like screens. At nighttime, the whole jungle comes alive. Everything can eat you. So it's like the amount of life and death that is happening around you is the place for me was huge. Like just being there was almost as intense as the actual ayahuasca.
Uh-huh.
Um, but I'll say one thing about ayahuasca for me, anyways. I had already been in meditation for a long time leading up to it, and when I did it, it was very beautiful and it was very intense, and I had some real moments in ceremony because we did like four, I can't remember how many we did. We did a bunch, and but I still walked away in my heart knowing that it wasn't as potent as meditation for me.
Mm-hmm.
It took me and it brought me right back, and I think the whole point is to give you a glimpse of what's possible,
Mm-hmm.
of what's there,
Mm-hmm.
but it brings you right back. It's like
Yeah.
I think even might have even been Ram Dass is like introduces you God, but it brings you right back.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas
Yeah.
meditation is incremental, but it's constantly bringing you up an inch rather than going like 10 feet into the air. You go up an inch, but then you go up another inch, and you kind of keep it for a lot longer, so you can
Yeah.
keep going on that journey. And it's a grounded journey. The problem with ayahuasca is that it takes you so high and it takes a while to really land after it. I would say a solid couple of years, if I'm going to be honest, to download the information.
Mm-hmm.
If you're constantly going there, you're never landing. So that
Mm-hmm.
information is never being grounded into something real, into real usable energy in your life.
Mm-hmm.
So then you end up in this place, and if you don't ever come down, like, I mean, a lot of teachers stay up there, and that's their path. But I knew that for me, it wasn't. Not if I wanted to be part of this world. Not if I
Yeah.
wanted to be a family man. You know.
Yeah.
But it was a beautiful experience, and I won't say that I will never do it again, but I would honestly say that the main reason why I would do it again is to be in the experience of that jungle. That was like to me
Mm-hmm.
the most magical thing.
Some of my most powerful experiences have been through breath work.
Mm.
Um, how about yourself? Have you had any experience with breath work?
I do, but I don't do the breath work that has become so popular these days.
Okay.
Mine is much more subtle.
Uh-huh.
And um, yeah, I've had many experiences with breath work, but not in the same way. It's much, my breath work is not as aggressive,
Yeah.
but it's for a lot longer.
Mm-hmm.
So it takes you into very ethereal place, but not. it's hard to explain. It's not the same high. I know, and I've done, of course, I've done like stronger, like Bastrika type work.
Yeah.
I actually just did this weekend. But the work that I did with breath, I would do about 2 hours of pranayama every morning. I did this for a couple years,
Yeah.
and I would say that the net benefit is that it changed my life. So it wasn't like I was,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it was more of like the meditation that I was in when I was doing it, and the how it was embodying a particular frequency and then when I did the meditation, it was like that kind of meditation. It was a glow that I was carrying about myself throughout the whole day and then throughout the whole year. And so yeah, I've done a lot of breath work, but not in the way that I've done pranayama. There's
Yeah, yeah, yoga
pranayama,
from the Raja path, the royal path, and I feel that that's one thing that's missing from a
and
lot of
it's
the.
a very much part of what I do still. Like pranayama is like a huge part of what I teach.
What are your favorite pranayama techniques?
Depends. Depends on what's needed. What's the season? What's the constitution? Personally, right now, Shitali and like all the cooling ones, because I had some hyperthyroid issues as of late.
Uh-huh.
And when I got my operation, it was due to Crohn's. And if you delve into their Vedic perspective of all this, is the Pitta Vata imbalance. A lot of it has to do because of the way that I grew up and a lot of unspoken stories that I was carrying and a lot of things that I should have said that I never did builds up in the system. And
Uh-huh.
I think this is probably the root cause of not. I mean, there's like environmental, but I think a lot of autoimmune issues are a result of self-talk and how you're like literally speaking to your body, speaking to yourself. Anyways, so
Mm.
this is a pitta vata imbalance. So I personally am now doing pranayamas that deal with that,
Okay.
and
Okay.
depends on the season. So I would say like my favorite pranayama, or I think one of the most powerful pranayamas,
Yeah.
and a lot of people won't think of it, is samavriti. And the reason for it is because of how subtle it is. It
Uh.
means that you have to get to a really, really subtle place within your ability to perceive that breath to really understand how beneficial that breath is. It's a breath that integrates all the other pranayamas. Like after you do every pranayama, you always go back to samavriti. But when you develop a real relationship to samavriti, it can take you deep, 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 deep.
Mm-hmm.
Because the harder Bastrika breaths or the breaths that have become very popular, they excite everything, and then
Yeah.
you can go there. It's easy. But when you're dealing with like a breath that doesn't do much, it means that you have to go down there. You have to get so incredibly subtle to actually see it for what it is. It's not as
Mm-hmm.
obvious. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that it's like in kung fu they say a punch. You first day you learn a punch, and the last thing you learn is always a punch. It's always the same technique, the same technique. Same thing with samavriti. You learn it your first day, but it's a lifelong practice. It's a lifelong
Mm-hmm.
practice to keep going deeper, deeper into that simple technique. And all the other ones allow me to go deeper into that one.
Yeah, and then that leads into our meditation on the Raja path, the royal path. And like when I teach now, I try to always incorporate meditation to the end of the practice to encourage that, because meditation for you and myself have been huge tools on our path. And I've, especially since COVID, during COVID, I practice a lot online with Ryan Lear, who I know you also know, another
Mhm.
Lululemon global ambassador. And he's all about yoga is not a workout, it's a work in. And he goes back to the roots of the yogic philosophy, and so that got me more a lot heavier on that path versus just the asana.
Mhm.
So it's like living the yamas, the niyamas, and like familiarizing myself with the sutras, not only the Patanjali's, but the Bhagavad Gita and other sacred texts.
Mhm.
What has yogic philosophy, what role has that played in your journey?
Yeah, I think yoga philosophy at the beginning of my journey played a huge part. I read the text and I was really deep into Georg Fierstein, like some of those dense texts,
Yeah,
and the Bhagavad Gita and the sutras, Yoga Samhita, all those I read
yeah,
them. Um, but it was practice that really consecrated all that work. You start practicing so much that eventually, and then you start teaching, the it starts to blur. It's like, is this something, when you start sharing the practice, is this something that I read or is this something that I know?
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? Is
Yeah,
eventually
yeah,
it like it starts to seep into you, and so the philosophy becomes living.
yeah,
I don't really go too much into the text these days. Not that I won't. I actually will. I'll go
yeah.
back to them because they're a living text. Like you read the Yoga Sutra the first day that you do a yoga class, you decide to go read the Yoga Sutras. They make absolutely somewhat sense. But then you practice for 10 years and you read them again.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I could have
Yeah.
written this. You know what I mean? So it's a
Yeah.
very much, if you never read the philosophies, but you practice with the right teacher, that philosophy will be there, will be in the
Mm.
practice, especially if you're doing, you know, it's interesting because the way that I read the sutras early on, then I did a training and then I found my teacher and he taught me the way that he taught me. And then I got into the sutras again. And it wasn't until after I did practice them that I realized exactly what they were. Like the process of my practice has been this. So it's a living philosophy that even if you don't read them and you practice with devotion, they will start to seep into you.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
my practice is always the same. It's very simple. It's asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and then eventually samadhi. You know,
Mm-hmm. How would you explain samadhi?
you can't really. I
Yeah.
think I think the closest thing is doing ayahuasca, but it's um infinity. You know, like you get into this
Yeah.
like complete space where like your body's really not felt anymore. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you relax so much that you don't even know where your body ends,
You
kind of thing. And
disappear,
it's very
but you're so
you
present.
can't really explain it. It's
No.
like a trip. It's a real trip, and
Yeah.
and there's no way to explain it. There's nothing to explain. I don't think you should ever try to contextualize it because in
Mm-hmm.
the contextualizing, you're fragmenting, you put it into
Yeah.
blocks, and then suddenly the magic of it is gone. Just
Yeah.
do it,
Yeah.
go to these places and just live your life, and
Become
it
it.
will start to permeate into everything that you do.
I love that. I love that. So, what are you currently studying?
A lot of film. Yeah, these days, as far as like studying, is more so in the arts,
Uh,
and I'm practicing. Yeah, I'm not really deep into like yogic studies other than my
uh,
practice. Actually, that's not true. I'm studying more Ayurveda, mostly
yeah.
because of necessity.
Okay.
But I do want to go back into my studies, and I'm really seeking to maybe go. Mostly because he was a big influence early on in my journey. I'd love to go study with Richard Freeman.
Mm.
So I've been looking at potentially going to do that.
Amazing. So you mentioned film. Film has been a big role in your journey,
Hmm.
and I'm curious what it's taught you. Like one thing that I learned from my 5 years in film is the mask we all wear, because they say action, you're supposed to play this role, and then they say cut, and then you see everyone kind of like, for example, like there's a lot of Hallmark movies that film in Winnipeg. So okay, it's Christmas time, everyone feel like happy and good, and then it's cut, and then everyone just like you can stay happy and joyful,
Yeah.
like,
Well, it's exhausting. It can be very exhausting. I think that's what
but
it
it
is.
doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be with like your face. It's just an energy.
Hmm.
It's an energy. And so the film, seeing people play all these roles and me playing all these roles, it's really got me to examine like who am I truly, not who I'm told to be by teachers, society, religion, culture, social media. Like what is at the core of that? That's the self-inquiry that the film has helped me further
Hmm.
deepen.
I think
Um,
in many ways, me as well, but not in the same way, or maybe in the same way. So I performed. I grew up in front of doing a lot of stuff in front of the camera, and
yeah,
then I decided to get behind the camera. It's an interesting thing, man. Like now that I'm doing a lot of behind, like filming and doing my own, I'm writing a lot. The desire to be in the front of the camera or like being in front of a camera is a lot harder than it used to be for some reason. I don't know what it is. Suddenly being behind the camera has done something to being in front of the camera, and I don't know what that is. But the reason why I got behind the camera is because I really have always wanted to. I love film. Like I love film, and I wasn't really. They say beggars can't be choosers. Then I don't want to be a beggar. I want to make my own stuff, and that's kind of the journey that I'm on right now. So I started a production company. We're doing, and a lot of it right now has been more working with like brands and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
the purpose of that was to get equipment, and so now that phase is done. And I'm still working with brands, but I'm currently now in pre-production to a bunch of short films. That is going
Uh,
to be the journey then to eventually make the other films that we want to make. And
mhm.
I have a good creative partner who has access to a lot of networking within the business. I myself have stepped out of it for many reasons, but one of it is just like I don't really enjoy the industry. And I want to really do make films, but I don't really enjoy the industry. So it's like it's a weird thing. And a lot of the stuff that I want to do is going to be outside of the industry and then try to sell it.
Yeah. What you want to? What are the films you want to make? What is the message you are you wanting to share?
Nothing at this point. It's not. I don't know if I could really share it because it's not very
Okay.
yogic. Uh,
Yeah.
art films, and just like I love all genres. So we've been so okay. So what my friend and I are doing are basically we are committing to doing 10 short films in the next 2 years,
Uh,
and we're in pre-production of doing the first two right now. So we're exploring a lot of different topics, a lot of different genres, and the idea is somewhat exploration, but also developing like a body of work that's going to allow us to then garner attention to make bigger work. And so the stuff is very funny. Some of it is very odd. Some of it is on the border of being like absurd, like really absurd. So, but yeah, I can't really share too much beyond that at this point because
no,
it's still very much in pre-production and in the
that's
writing
okay.
mode. But it's been amazing to start this work because the reason why I got behind the camera and started doing this was out of necessity in 2019. I'd done this show for Netflix. I was in this TV series called Black Summer, and I did a couple episodes, and I reconnected with a really good friend of mine who had been like done work with many years ago, and he used to be a roommate of mine, Jesse Lipscomb. Everything kind of fell apart, and nobody was working, and we had this idea of shooting a film during COVID about the lockdowns. So, and we know actors from all over. Like one of our actors was Quentin from The Blind Side, the big black guy from The Blind Side. He was one of the actors, and we had actors in Vancouver. And the whole concept was built around doing it online, and then we had a really small crew, and then we shot in person. I guess my point is we made something out of nothing, out of $0, just him and I and like a crew of four, and we did this film, and it was awesome. We presented it, and it was great. And so this is just kind of like, okay, let's build on that. That we did that with nothing. Now let's do this, and so we're going to keep building on on that process of just taking initiative and just doing it. Yeah.
That's incredible, and I feel you've done that so many times in your life, whether that be starting your band or becoming a yoga teacher, traveling the world, getting into film. You've found something that you're called to and you dove into it.
Hmm.
Where has fear played a role in this journey? Like, what has your relationship with fear looked like, and how has that evolved?
Oh man, fear is always there, man. But you can befriend it. I think going back to this death piece.
Yeah,
Um, I think all fear at its like root is death, because fear is what? It's the assumption of the unknown, right?
yeah,
And what's the ultimate unknown? Is death. Like that's like the ultimate unknown. Is like
yeah,
it's
yeah.
we don't know what it is, right? And I've been close to it, and it gave me a gift. And then I've been going to Varanasi. You talk about these pilgrimages. This is one of them. Varanasi is this city in India where people go to die. especially yogis, they go to die because they believe that when you die in the city, you go into Purusha, you go into heaven. And people are, they burn the bodies of the god. There's death is thick. Like you go into that city and you can feel death, like it's in
Uh,
the air. First time I've been there 7 times. First time I went, I lasted like 3 days and I got the hell out of there. It was just like too overwhelming. And the city is like dirty and but you leave and then you can't stop thinking about this place. And so I kept
uh,
going back and kept going back and eventually it's like I think about it actually almost every day still. I want to go back. There's a calling to it and I think it's like what it's given me it's this closeness to death as a natural thing because we put a lot of distance in the West, we put a lot of distance between us and death. It's very taboo. It's out there. Let's forget about it. It's not going to happen. And there, they embrace it, and they almost see it as a birth. It's a birth of sorts. You're born from nothing. You go back to nothing. So it is kind of a birth. You're birthing back into it.
uh,
And I think the relationship that I developed there. Again, I don't know exactly what it did, but I've become a less fearful. There's something that I overcame by befriending that city, and it had and yeah, it made me a lot more fear. And I guess whenever I have a fear now, I kind of go into it. It's actually not a fear anymore. It's a oh there's okay that's the key right there. Let's turn the knob. It feels like
hmm
fear, but actually what it is, it's a doorknob. Let's turn it.
For one of your students, that is up against fear at that crossroads of should and must. So the path of should is everything they've been taught by school, parents, society. They should do this. They should play it safe. They should walk that known path versus the must. That's like the calling in the heart to start that band or to go to film school or to go to India. Um, but they're stuck because the should path is safe. It's known. What advice would you have for that hero?
The hardest part is getting to the moment when you make the decision to do it. Once
Yeah.
you make the decision, it's easy.
Uh,
Like say, for example, somebody wants to quit alcohol.
yeah.
The hardest thing you can do is to try to quit alcohol. The
Uh,
easiest thing you can do is just quit.
yeah.
Just stop. Just stop. That's the trick. And I know because I did it. Like that was it. I was like, okay, made the decision. You know what it is for me? This is another thing that my teacher taught me. It was always presented in the form of practice. So it's like, okay, I had an issue with alcohol for a while. It's like, okay, I'm going to give you a practice. Do you want to practice? He would say. And I was like, sure. Okay, but you have to do it because if you don't do it, your whole life will fall apart. And
Uh,
actually, it's true because there's a deeper message to that. It's more about accountability, right? So it's like, if you want to do it, I'll give you the practice. Okay. And then he would basically for example, one of us, okay, you're not going to drink alcohol for a year starting this date. And then when we put it in the frame of practice, it was less about giving up something and more about doing something.
mm,
And so a lot of what I do, I approach it in that way. It's almost like a practice. Okay, I'm going to do. I don't give up things. I just do another thing.
uh,
But getting up to that moment where you make that commit, it's making the commitment. Once you make the commitment, all you have to do is follow through. But the
hmm
hardest part is getting to that moment of commitment, like true commitment of like, okay, this is it. I'm done.
uh. And it's a choice. It's a choice,
It's a
and we have
choice.
that power.
It is a
But
choice,
there,
but that choice, there's so much noise that's telling you that there's no choice. It's
mm,
like you said, your parents, they're telling you, no, if you don't become a doctor, this like your life is gonna blah blah blah.
yeah,
At some point you gotta be like in my case, you gotta be a man. Like at
yeah,
some point you just gotta man up. It's the best way that I
and
can say it. It's like at some point you gotta stop fucking around and man up.
yeah,
Make the decision
um,
and then follow through.
mm,
And
s-
I could say that a lot nicer ways, but that's the way that it worked for me.
yeah,
To be
yeah.
nice
Man
about
the fuck
things
up.
sometimes is like I- sometimes you don't need somebody to be nice to you. You just need somebody to just tell you how it is.
Mm. And even though sometimes you're doing everything right, the God, the universe, something, some higher force will throw you a curveball, And you've mentioned so many of these challenges on your path. Moving to a new country, and having to start school, like junior high, I think you said, in Canada, coming from a foreign country. Um, your parents dying, you almost dying, all these challenges you've met along your journey. What have you learned from them, and what strategy did you gain that will help you with future challenges?
The one thing I learned is life is beautiful. Like life is just so fucking precious. Like it really, really is. And it can get really, really hard, but those hard times become superpowers
Mm,
because enough times getting through hard times will give you the confidence that this thing is just a thing that's going to pass.
mm,
I think that's the thing is like when you're young and you're getting into your teens and you get into even your 20s and maybe even to your I think 20s are very hard, more so than the 30s. Very, very hard because I always say that there's like different puberties that you go through in life. You know, when you're in your teens, you got a physical puberty and it's all about getting laid or like you have all this testosterone as like this. That's that puberty. And in your 20s is a very similar one, but it's psychological. You got all this energy, all this direction, and you're like, same way that you had physically, now it's mental. And then in your 30s is almost like a spiritual one. It's like you have like a spiritual puberty. Like you go through this like
yeah.
spiritual revolution in your 30s. And then when you get to your 40s, you have all that experience. And now you just can discern better. You know, and I
Hmm.
think that when you have that in your 20s, that like psychological maturation or like that stepping up that you do in your 20s, it can be very, very scary for a lot of people because you think you have to have everything figured out. I remember the day that I turned 30, I was just like, oh, I'm young. Like at 29, I felt so old. And then the
Yeah.
day that I turned 30, I was like, I'm young. Like nothing had changed. Like the world didn't fall up. It was like there's like Y2K. Remember, the world was supposed to finish in Y2K, and
Yeah.
everybody was just like, and then it was like, okay, nothing happened. It's like
Yeah.
it's constantly that. Like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
the sun
I
will
like
come
that.
up tomorrow. You know that song? It's literally that. Like it's like
Yeah.
there's always tomorrow, and you can take things day by day, but enough wins, enough getting through things, like bolster you up to know that you're resilient and that
Mm,
you're developing the tools. And if you don't let it get you down, if you don't build stories around them, they're just gonna give you more ammunition in life.
yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this has been so fun. You've shared so much wisdom, and I'm really grateful for your time. I have two final questions that I ask every guest, and we come to that point. And the first one, through all the, and you may have answered this one already, but let me throw it at you again. Through all the highs and lows that has been your journey, the hero's journey that you've lived, what has been the greatest life lesson you've learned on your path that you feel called to share with me and anyone tuning in right now?
Oh man. Um, I think I kind of just did when I was saying about like if you are at a time in your life where you're feeling like things are really rough, just know that that becomes ammunition and just hang in there. And you know, my father used to always say to me and to just dream, you know, keep your dreams
Mm,
alive. Keep your dreams alive and let that be the foundation of your faith in many ways that can it can bring you into a time that is better if you're not feeling like today is the day for you.
yeah.
Um, uh, there's, I feel like I should have a better answer for you right now, but I don't have anything that comes to mind.
You shared so much, so that's perfect. Final question. We've examined your past, we've examined your present. Let's fast forward into the future. We're gonna fast forward quite a ways from now, and we're gonna be alongside an 85-year-old Andrew Misle. Who is that man? Where are you? Who are you surrounded by? What is the legacy you've left in your 85 years? And most importantly, what are the predominant feelings in your being?
Well, it's funny because I was actually I was talking to somebody about when I wanted to start teaching regular classes again, and I said probably my 70s. I taught a lot of regular classes, and I gave that up to now pursue becoming a father and building my business. Okay, so the one thing that I think I'll be doing around that time is hopefully teaching yoga on a more regular basis, and hopefully with grandchildren. And yeah, that's a really good question. What do I want to accomplish in the next 30, 40 years? Is I want to delve into my film career and create bodies of work that are going to be reflective of philosophies that I've learned in life and that can hopefully inspire people. That's really what I love to do. I
Hmm.
also want to do documentary work. I just want to do work that I think moves people and inspires people to be, yeah, I guess be on a healing journey that feels authentic. To be on a healing journey that feels authentic and not, um, oh man, that's a good question. Yeah, so make films. I want to make films that I can be proud of when I'm at that age and that my children can be proud of looking at back. But more importantly than that, I just want to build family. I want to build family. That means have homes that we all share together and that we have grandchildren with and have, yeah, just have family around. I guess that's what I want.
Sounds fabulous. And
Here's one
what?
thing. Here's one thing that
Yeah.
I kind of like. This is maybe a little bit off topic, but when I was in Italy,
Uh,
I saw a lot of generational homes.
uh,
Like people like three generations in one home. We've kind of let that go in the West. That's one
yeah.
dream that I have. So I would love to have land where actually maybe my kids will live nearby and have just family around.
It's a shame that we've let that go because when people get old in our society, we kind of throw them away. We put them in an old age home and like, yeah, we discard them, whereas elders should be revered. They come with so much wisdom.
Wisdom. Yeah, and they live longer if you keep them around, and then the kids benefit from that. It's like the positives that you get by having generational homes is so huge. And it's such
Hmm.
a scam in many ways. Like the only people that benefit from this, like leaving away when you're 18-year old, is the banks. Nobody else
Yeah,
benefits from this. Kids are, of course, are going to leave, but always leave the door open for them to come back. And yeah, my dream in my 80s is just to be surrounded by family, to be doing the things that I still love doing. Hopefully, still being able to practice yoga and teach yoga, and maybe even at that age, still doing film. Like
yeah,
basically, what I'm doing now is what I want to be doing when I'm older.
yeah. And what are the predominant feelings in your being, in your soul?
Pride, like real pride, not pride in the core sin kind of pride, but just like contentment. Maybe that's a better word. Just
Mm,
knowing that I had rough waters in my life and that at an early age I was able to maturate past them, and then whatever I gained from that I was able to build something for my family and maybe extended family and people beyond. Is that
mm-hmm,
I when I got really sick with the Crohn's, I was in the middle of actually my yoga practice and I lost my colon, and I had a real vision of just a part of me like literally dying and exiting. I
mm-hmm,
actually felt like a lineage on my father's side, literally acutely concentrating in my body,
uh,
and a lot of the karmas in my familiar in my father's side were extricated from my lineage, and that's
uh,
proof because of the relationship that I have with my kids. My father didn't have his father.
yeah,
His father was an alcoholic. Like there's a real lineage of like bastards. So
yeah,
I felt like if anything, I took on all that karma through yoga because I was
yeah,
still in yoga, and I felt like the disease got so bad because of yoga. I was literally working those karmas,
yeah.
and they left my body, and then I had children, and that's no longer part of our lineage. So I guess maybe that's one thing that I'll be happy to have contributed in my family line.
Mm. Okay, so I just invite you to close your eyes and just channel into that 85-year-old Andrew. You rewrote your lineage. You're content. You're proud. You've built family. you're surrounded by loved ones, your children, your grandchildren. You've had a wonderful career in film, many bodies of work where you've inspired, you've moved people, you've helped so many on their healing journeys. Sit with that man, sit near the fire with that man, with that Andrew. And I'm going to bring you back. I'm going to bring you back to current day Andrew and that 85-year-old man, that elder. He whispers in your ear a message. What does he share with you?
Keep going.
Haha, keep going is right. Thank you so much, Andrew. It's been a real privilege. It's been so nice getting to reconnect with you again.
Yeah,
It's been a
likewise.
long time, and excited to see where your journey takes you. For people wanting to connect, they can find you at andrewmisleyoga.com,
Hmm.
on Instagram, Andrew_Misle, Misle. Anywhere else, or any last closing words?
Yeah, like I said, I'm not teaching regular scheduled classes, but I do uh, trainings and I do workshops. And if you're on my email list, you can get some information on that. I do a lot of, I'm mostly these days doing retreats. I have one in the fall coming up next in Johnson's Landing in September, and we have a couple spots left. So if anybody wants to come to that, it's a really even the retreats have changed quite a bit. Like I do my best to get out of the way and try to like just provide enough for people to have the time that they want to have. And in that particular retreat is the fall. This is like the 10th year that I've offered a retreat in the fall. I find the fall to be like where New Year's should be. New Year's in January makes no sense to me. For me, the fall is like the equinox. That's where
Uh,
real intentions can be set. And so that's why we do it at that time of the year. You're invited as well if you want to come out. It's very chill. Music,
mm,
cold dipping, sauna, yoga, good food.
sounds beautiful.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining. We close every conversation with a digital fist bump, a choice to step in to the winner's circle. Boom.
Hey, thanks
Thank
so
you.
much. I had a really
Yeah,
good time. I'm glad that you're doing this. Yeah, it's very, very authentic to you, man. Thank you so much
yeah,
for having me.
yeah. Thank you so much, Andrew.
Peace, brother.
Peace.